We finally made it to Friday, the 4th of July. It's Independence Day, and it's happening on a Friday. How great is that? We love the 4th of July. We love Independence Day. We love a good holiday, and we love a good Friday because that means it's time for the Morning Pitt Mailbag here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. You know what we do every Friday? We wrap up the week by taking questions from you, the Pitt fans, on the message boards at Panther-Lair.com. You see the website below, Panther-Lair.com. The Between Fifth and Forbes message board is our premium football message board. We take questions every week. Pitt fans post questions throughout the week, and we answer as many as we can here on the Friday edition of the Morning Pitt. I love it. I hope you at least tolerate it and enjoy it, if nothing else. It gives us a bunch of different topics to discuss, and we have a lot of different things we can kind of get to, and it's great because you guys pick the topics instead of me picking one thing for us to talk about. Oh, Kyle Lewis, is he going to live up to the hype? We can have 10 different topics, which I don't know if we ever get to 10 questions, but we can get to as many as we can, or we try to get to as many as we can every week. So let's jump into it. This week's Morning Pitt Mailbag, the 4th of July Morning Pitt Mailbag here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Yeah, it's Friday here on the Morning Pitt, and that means it's time for the Morning Pitt Mailbag. You know what we do? We take questions from Pitt fans at Panther-Lair.com, and you know that website, Panther-Lair.com. It's the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet. Pitt football, Pitt basketball, Pitt recruiting, Pitt transfers, everything you could possibly need is right there, Panther-Lair.com. And you can go to the message boards at Panther-Lair.com and interact with other Pitt fans all day, every day. Pitt fans are hanging out on the message boards talking about what's going on in the world of Pitt sports, and you can be a part of that as well. I think it's the best online community of Pitt sports fans you're going to find. And so if you want all the content and the coverage and the community and the discussion, or conversation is what I should say. So for the alliteration, the content, the coverage, the community, and the conversation, you can be a part of it at Panther-Lair.com. And of course, our YouTube channel here, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, where we have all of our Pitt video content. These daily morning Pitt videos, Monday through Friday, our weekly live show that we do every Wednesday night at 8:30 p.m. with me and Jim Hammett, and you chiming in on the comments and the questions. It's a lot of fun having the back and forth there. We have press conferences and post-game shows and interviews and all kinds of stuff here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. So make sure you never miss any of our Pitt video content. Like this video and subscribe, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, and that way you won't miss anything that we do right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Let's jump into the questions. We had one left over from last week, and then we will, I don't think we got to this question last week, and then we'll jump into some great questions this week. From last week, TPFKA_JD says, Pitt's recruiting classes seem to be a notch above in their recruiting recent classes. What do you think has caused this uptick? Well, I think there's a couple things. I think anytime you see kind of a shift in recruiting up or down, there's probably multiple factors that are going to go into it. You have changes in coaching staff. You have changes with the coaching staff, either assistant coaches changing, coordinators or head coaches. That's going to affect the trajectory of the recruiting. And then, of course, the on-field results are going to affect the trajectory of the recruiting. And, I think if you feel like I'll say right off the bat, Pitt's recruiting classes for the past 10 years have largely felt more or less the same. I think you've largely gotten the same caliber of recruit for the most part. I think you've gotten similar classes. Some have had strengths in different places. Some have had more sort of high-end talent. Some have been deeper. Some have been, had a higher floor and all of that. There's probably one or two classes that have just not been that great. Obviously, the 2021 recruiting class, which, didn't work out very well. That was the COVID class where none of those guys got to take official visits. That class didn't work out very well. And what's funny about that is they had a whole bunch of 4-star guys. They cleaned up locally, or did well locally, I should say. And, it was one of the higher rated classes Pat Narduzzi has had. So, it didn't quite exactly work out there. But I think what you've seen in recent years, if you feel like there's been an uptick, and I do think they've had some good recruiting wins in the last 3 or 4 years, part of it is due to some of the success they've had. And I've taken a lot of guff in the past about, well, where's the big recruiting bump coming from all the success they had, after the ACC championship season. And there's a couple things there. I think one, what I always say is the recruiting classes sort of come in the on-field success has its biggest impact in the next recruiting class. So 2021, they win the ACC. That didn't really affect the 2022 recruiting class because that class was largely, most of them were committed by the time that ACC championship game against Wake Forest was being played in Charlotte. And so there wasn't a huge impact there. But where that championship really had an effect was in the next class, the 2023 recruiting class, the one that, they were juniors when that championship happened. The following June, they were going into their senior years and they took their official visits, and Pitt landed a bunch of guys, like a Jordan Bass or a Kenny Johnson or an Isaiah Neal. Like, they had some really good recruiting wins in that class, and I think that was a pretty good class. And I think a lot of those guys have made plays and made an impact. And I think you've seen some of that success, and I think they recruited well. And I would say the same for the 2024 recruiting class. I think they recruited well in 2024 because, again, that class was being recruited on the strength of, how they followed the ACC championship season with a 9-4 season the next year. They had won 20 games over the course of the last 2 years, and they had back-to-back, first-round draft picks in back-to-back years and all this stuff. And so you had all this success that I think led into recruiting success with the class of 2024. It's not the entire factor. It's not the whole reason they recruited well or didn't recruit well, but I think it is a factor. This year, I think they recruited well in the month of June. They did well here. I think they were able to, even though they went 7-6 last year, and Pitt fans think mostly tend to focus on that 6-game losing streak in the Toledo game. I think Pitt has been able to recruit successfully on the success that they had. The 7-0 start, Eli Holstein, Desmond Reed, Kyle Lewis, the individual stars who were coming back, and the roles that those stars played in the 7-0 start when Pitt looked like it had a shot at a college football playoff. And if you're Pitt, one of the biggest things you always have to be selling is we can get in. Particularly in this 12-team playoff structure or any kind of expanded playoff structure, you have to be selling we can get in. We can do it. And the 2021 ACC championship, you can sell like, hey, look, in a 12-team playoff, we're in that year. Like we're not playing we might be playing in the Peach Bowl, but we are in the playoffs in a 12-team field. And then you can sell, in 2024, when we were 7-0 start before our left tackle and our quarterback got hurt, we were on the path for a college football playoff bid. If you're Pitt, if you're most ACC schools, almost every ACC school, you need to be selling the idea that we can get in. And so that's something that Pitt has probably been selling, I would say, in the recruiting process. This idea of being able to get in, and I think recruits are buying into it. So, you look at some of the individual success they had last year, look at some of the team success they had last year, and the potential that I think with the right kind of narrative, you can convince recruits, that a certain potential exists for, postseason success. And so I think that plays into it as well. And I think they've just got some really good recruiters on this staff. I do. These offensive guys are recruiting like crazy. Jacob Bernowski and Cade Bell are working tirelessly. I think J.J. Laster's doing a really good job. Lindsey Lamar seems to be connecting with guys. And I think the defensive staff is really strong. I think Ryan Manilak has found his niche as a linebacker recruiter and an area recruiter in Ohio like he is. I think Corey Sanders is a really good recruiter. Tim Dowse seems to connect well with defensive linemen. I think Archie Collins is a really solid recruiter. So I think they've got good recruiters on this staff, and they've got enough recent success, 3 out of the last 4 years, that they can really sell on to convince recruits that Pitt has, something going for it. And so I think that's a big part of it. And in the big picture, I feel like Pitt's recruiting classes are pretty similar and have been pretty similar and consistent over the last 10 years. But if there's been an uptick, that's what I would attribute it to. All right, questions from this week. As we move ahead, Smenges says, how do you feel about the new era of college sports beginning on Bobby Bonilla Day? Coincidence, karma, fate, other? Coincidence. And it was funny. Somebody was pointing out, Bobby Bonilla gets paid by the Mets every July 1st. He's not the only one. There's other guys in other sports who get a deferred payment every July 1st. It's just we love to clown on the Mets the most for it on Bobby Bonilla Day. But in terms of college, I would count it as a coincidence. Jay Lazinger says, I can't tell if this is recency bias, but do you think the $20 million that each school has to play with changes the fact that high school recruiting will matter again? Otherwise, I never would have thought we could have kept Desmond Reed, Kyle Lewis, Eli Holstein, and others. I don't entirely understand what you're asking, but I mean, in terms of high school recruiting and how it's going to be affected by the new era of college sports with revenue sharing and all of that, I do think, like, first of all, I never thought high school recruiting stopped mattering or stopped being important. I think it always was. I think it always has been, and I think it always will be. If it was starting to fade for some schools, I think it does enjoy some resurgence here. If this new era of revenue sharing and paying the student athletes evolves to include multi-year contracts that hold guys in place. If you don't have that, if you're liable to lose anybody at any time, year after year, you're rebuilding your roster. I mean, there's no point in focusing on high school guys. What's the point of bringing a guy in and developing him if you're just going to lose him? But if you can sign him to a 3-year deal out of high school or a 2-year deal out of high school or a 4-year deal out of high school, well, now it's important again. Now it's really important. You've got to get those guys right. And if you get it right and you develop them well, you are going to be that much further ahead than all those schools that are scrambling to find, player A or player B at position 1 or position 2 out of the transfer portal. You've got this homegrown product. And so I think it's still really important, particularly if you're able to lock guys in and maybe cut down on the movement a little bit with multi-year contracts. I think that's probably how it'll affect recruiting the most, but that's just me. Big Husky 34 wants to know who gets the most interceptions in the secondary this year. I think it's going to be Cruz Brookins. I think he's just got a nose for the ball. He's really good at making plays. He gets a lot of interceptions in practice, and I think he carries that over into the season. The one thing that'll be interesting to see is what safety position he ends up playing. There's the field safety and the boundary safety. Could call him a free safety and a strong safety. That free safety is going to be back there having more opportunities to get his hands on the football, whereas the strong safety is going to be down in the box. The boundary safety is going to be down in the box, playing closer to the line of scrimmage, more in run support. That's where Jordan Whitehead played when he got 100 tackles. That's where Paris Ford was playing when he had 90-some tackles in 2019. It's a little bit tougher to get in the passing lanes and get interceptions if you're playing that strong safety, that boundary safety spot. So if that's where Brookins mostly plays and Javon McIntyre's more of the field safety, the free safety, it might be a little bit tougher, but I'm still going to put my money on Brookins. I think all the success he has had in practice over the last 2 years is going to carry over to the field now when he becomes a full-time starter and he's out there every game. I'm buying in on Cruz Brookins. I'm starting to get to that point of the summer, and there'll probably be a Morning Pitt about this and probably a 3-2-1 column section and probably like 3 other things because it's July and we have to find a lot of content. I'm getting to that point in the summer where I'm buying in on guys. I mean, like Kyle Lewis, Desmond Reed, we're all bought in on those guys. There's nothing there. But like Cruz Brookins, I'm buying in on Cruz Brookins. Rasheem Biles, I think we're all mostly bought in on, but I'm definitely buying in on him. I'm buying in on Jaden Moore, the defensive end. Like I keep talking about him ever since he transferred here. I'll talk about him like once a month and talk about how, really small sample size at Oregon last year, but taking that into consideration, his numbers compared very favorably with some of the best pass rushers and edge rushers in the Big Ten last season. And just keep hearing really good things about Jaden Moore. I think he's going to I'm buying in on him. I think he's going to be really good. So I'm buying in on him. I'm buying in on the defensive tackles. Offensively, I don't know who I'm buying in on yet, other than Desmond Reed. But Cruz Brookins is definitely a guy that I am buying in on in 2025. I think he's going to be in line for a huge season, and I think he's going to, to answer your question, I think he's going to lead the team or lead the secondary in interceptions. Maybe lead the team. I don't know. Probably depends on how much Kyle Lewis is able to, how many plays he's able to make. Richard2928 says, now that the players are getting paid and they're not employees of the school, are they 1099 contractors? I can see a new recruiting twist. Our state and local taxes are less than whoever you'll make more money with. Make more money with us. Yeah, I mean, that will become a factor. I think it is a factor, when you look at pro sports free agency. Like sometimes I think if the money's close and all other factors are equal, it becomes an element to consider of, state and local taxes. Like how much of your, contractor you're actually going to be able to keep and how much are you going to have to give to the government. Right now, so I don't think they're 1099 contractors. I don't think that's how it's being worked. It seems like the way it's being worked is they're signing their marketing rights over to the school, and then the school is sharing revenue. It's revenue sharing, not paying. And then you have these like marketing rights deals that I think sort of circumvent a lot of the employee or even 1099 contractor talk. That's my understanding of it. Now, the NIL, clearinghouse or whatever they're calling it, does say that you have to, any NIL deal over $600 has to be vetted, which incidentally is the amount that you have to declare, on your taxes as a 1099 contractor. If you make more than $600 from one source, you've got to declare that. So it's funny that they picked that number, but I digress. I don't think they're 1099 contractors. They're not employees. It's a revenue sharing system, which is probably the easiest workaround to avoid employee status and 1099 status. H2P Falbert says, do you anticipate any changes in how the media interacts with players now that they're being paid? Personally, I'd like to see more players be made available for interviews and engage more frequently. Do you think that's a realistic expectation? That's an interesting question. That's a really interesting question about how these guys, their interactions with the media and sort of their public-facing appearances will change in this new era. Pat Narduzzi likes to have a lot of say over who talks to the media after any given practice or after any given game. It pretty much comes from him. Suggestions can be made to him, but he's going to sign off on each guy who goes up to that podium. What I think you could see happen, and you saw bits and pieces of this, and even on this very YouTube channel a few years ago, what I think you could see happen is student athletes, players, let's just say players, doing more public engagements and media engagements independently. Like setting it up. All right, whoever, let's say Eli Holstein, right, wants to do a show like the Kenny Pickett show, that we did here 4 years ago. He goes through his agent. He works out a deal with us and a sponsor, whoever, and every week he makes an appearance, just like the old Ben Roethlisberger show on the Fan. I mean, it's like I could see more of that, and even if it's not just like a weekly engagement, a one-off thing, like where they get paid. It's an appearance fee, and so it's a way to make money. But I could see more of that happening, sort of media opportunities, interviews, public engagements outside the purview of the school and the head coach who wants to decide who gets to talk to the media and who doesn't. So I could see some of that. That would probably be the biggest change I would anticipate. What would be interesting, though, is if you get into like contract situations where they're signing these rev share deals and rev share contracts with the schools, if there's language built in about media obligations. Now, again, I don't think that would happen at Pitt because Pat Narduzzi wants to control that in the moment. No, this guy had a bad practice. He's not talking, which that's not like some exaggeration or crazy scenario. Like that's what happens. So I don't see Pitt going that route of building media obligations into the contracts, but I could see, like I say, outside of the school things happening for some of these guys as a way to get more money. MGH421, actually, we got a couple more I want to get to. MGH421 says, do you think you'll do a schedule preview by game for football? It'd be interesting to meet with the other 24/7 sites in a game preview. Yeah, we're going to have, actually, I think we're starting our schedule breakdown next week. We'll definitely have in the season, we do our Behind Enemy Lines series that we always did. We'll definitely be featuring 24/7 sites from throughout the network, covering these other schools in the week leading up to the game. I don't know if we'll really get too much from them this summer, but we can work on some of those things. We'll definitely be having a schedule breakdown, though, starting next week as we get closer to the season because it's coming up fast. I love this question, and we'll finish on this one here. I love this. Potter County native says, will a defensive tackle have a strip sack this season that leads to a scoop and score by another defensive player? Who might be candidates for this play in your imagination? I love imagining these kinds of plays because you throw out a bunch of these like sort of ridiculous scenarios, and if one of them hits, you just never let people forget it. I said before the Syracuse game last year, Rasheem Biles was going to score on a pick six. He did it on like the first play. I am a god. So defensive tackle, strip sack, scoop and score. Who's going to do it? All right. It's going to be against Louisville. Okay. Sean Fitzsimmons is going to eat up a double team and push it into the backfield. Isaiah Neal's going to loop around him, little like twist game up front, come in and hit the quarter. He's going to loop around Fitzsimmons to the right. He's going to hit the quarterback blind side, okay? Hit him from back. I forget who Louisville's quarterback is this year. It doesn't matter. He's going to hit him, knock the ball out. Rasheem Biles, who blitzes on that play, is going to scoop it and score. And Pitt will still lose the game. Forget the last part, but that's what's going to happen. Fitzsimmons creates penetration. Neal forces the fumble, the strip sack. Biles, scoop and score, touchdown. Write it down. Book it and lock it. That's what's going to happen this year. I love making predictions like that because if something even remotely close to that happens, you'll never hear the end of it from me. I got to write that down. I'm going to make this into one of those little videos we put at the top of articles so you can watch this all the time and be reminded that I predicted it when it happens. All right. Great questions this week. Thanks, everybody who chimed in. We love it. It's good times. Always enjoy doing these Morning Pitt Mailbags. Remember, if you want to be part of the Morning Pitt Mailbag, and we got a few questions left over, so we'll definitely get to those next week. We put up the post every Tuesday on the Between Fifth and Forbes message board at Panther-Lair.com. You can put your questions in that post and in that thread, and we will answer as many as we can in next week's Morning Pitt Mailbag. In the meantime, thanks so much for tuning in today. Thanks for watching the videos all week long. We appreciate it. Like this video, subscribe to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Have a great 4th of July. Have a safe one. Have a happy one and all those different things. Enjoy your weekend. And we'll catch up with you on Monday, folks, right here for the Morning Pit, right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.